This is the Almost Awakened Podcast, a no-nonsense approach to spirituality with your hosts, Brittany Hartley and Bill Reel. Here we dive deep into the wisdom traditions while acknowledging insightful breakthroughs in science, psychology, and human development. Our goal is to explore the good life and the very best of spirituality. No nonsense required. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources we shared. And now, today's podcast episode.
All right. Britt Hartley, how are you?
I'm so good, Bill. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited for today's conversation. But before we get to it, anything going on in your life?
I'm working on a youth program. It's almost ready to kind of show to the public, but putting my money where my mouth is when it comes to trying to do, have the conversations that we're having and the work that we're doing, and how do we, the big issue that I meet with, any adult when I'm meeting with a client is, how do I pass this on to my teens or my kids? And so I'm really excited. I've been working on that for a long time. Because that's always been the dream. I was a seminary teacher, and I was a history teacher, and I was a philosophy teacher, and I was always trying to find some way or some system where I could teach the class that I wanted to teach, and I'm finally trying to be able to do it. So that's the project that I've been working on, and this audience will be the first to know when that's all done. So
I'm glad to hear it. Whenever you're doing something, it seems to be meaningful, and I'm really appreciative of being able to rub shoulders with somebody who's really makes an effort to make a difference in the world.
Appreciate that. And appreciate you, Bill, and all the stuff. I mean, you're not only on this podcast, but other podcasts doing lots of conversations about lots of things, and just rolling along, enjoying.
I'm having a fun life. This is good stuff.
Yeah. It's the Sisyphus. We're rolling this ball up the hill, and it may ultimately be meaningless, but it's, we're enjoying the journey. So that's
you recommended a book to me. I put a little post on Facebook asking for book recommendations, and it was about how spirituality really is the secret to people, losing some edge of depression and feeling more productive in the world. What was the name of the book?
I don't remember.
Oh man, somebody you recommended, somebody else seconded it, and anyway, I'm almost done with it. My goal is to read 50 books. I turned my phone off, so I don't have it in front of me, but I've been listening to hours and hours of it. So while you guys are talking today, I'll go find it and I'll share it maybe at the end of the show.
Okay. All right. I don't remember what I said.
No biggie, but it was about spirituality. That psychotherapy and all that stuff really doesn't get at it. It really needs to be wisdom, a sort of
rational mystic. I think, was it that?
I don't think so.
Maybe
that's
not.
Okay. No biggie.
All right, I'll figure it out.
But it does tie into, who you've got today is very much along the lines of
this is totally rare. This is totally rare for us. Usually when we have a guest on, it's like someone emails us saying, hey, I really like this voice over here. Can you invite him to the podcast? Or one of us will hear something and we'll send it to the other. And this is the first time that it's happened where I have this guy's books that I bought separately. And you, without us even talking to each other,
not at all,
also bought the books for your grandkids, and I have them for my kids.
And I love them. I went online, I did a bunch of research about what children's books have the most impact on children, and it was this
And I
person.
did the same thing, and it popped up on my Amazon because I like to, the algorithm will say, you might like this book or whatever. And so we both independently found this guy and then said, we've got to bring him onto the podcast because we were already doing this with our kids and grandkids. So without further ado, I'd like to bring onto the podcast Andrew Newman, who is the author of these books for kids called Conscious Stories. Andrew, so nice to have you on today.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, good morning for me from Maui, Hawaii. And so nice to be in a conversation about the almost awakened.
Show us your shirt, Andrew. I don't think this took any coordination either. Awake-ish. I like it.
Dr. Shafali has a wonderful parenting counsel and advice, and at a recent conference, she had these T-shirts, and I just thought awake-ish is perfect. I like the almost awakened. We're on a constant growing journey here. There is no period at the end of the sentence in our growth that says we've made it. We're like, this is the end.
Bill and I have gone through multiple, like, this is it. This is the idea. And then the next episode will be like, we're just children. Like, I've just been born and know nothing. And we just keep doing that over and over.
Yeah. I like Richard Rohr calls it kind of the second half of life, right? Second half of life. And I believed a lot of things on the front end. They turned out not to be true. So now anything goes. Let's figure out. I know what it isn't. I don't have a clue what it is, but let's try to tiptoe around the edges of it and see if we can learn something today.
Yep. This is why I'm so excited about creativity and helping people with creativity, because you just kind of summed it up. It's like, creativity bubbles. Where does it come from? Like when you start writing, like where does that poem come from? Where do these stories that I write come from? I mean, I know some of the things that inform them, but that spark of inspiration that comes through me, I'm kind of mesmerized watching myself do it. And that's, if we can live on that front edge of life gets very, very engaging.
Yeah, you're doing a great thing, my friend.
All right, so just so you know, Andrew, for our audience, so Bill and I, we don't talk about it on the podcast a lot because there's other podcasts that are dedicated to this, but Bill and I come from the Mormon tradition and then kind of had faith transitions through that tradition. And then now we're in this space of there were so many tools and resources and spiritual benefits from where we came from. We can't, have the intellectual humility and be able to continue on that same path, but how do we get all those juicy tools without having to believe things that we now may think are unbelievable, right? And so we're in this space, and so our audience is also kind of in this space of trying to dig out the best of spirituality while leaving as much baggage to the side as we can. So that's kind of our project, is this kind of baby in the bathwater project. And so we get people who are coming from religions, and then we also get people kind of on the other side who maybe have been raised secular but are wanting a little bit more. How do I raise children and that kind of thing? And so with that in mind, could you kind of just tell us who you are and really about just kind of how you were raised and the spiritual journey that kind of brought you to where you are today?
Thanks, Britt. You're listening to a South African accent. So I grew up in apartheid era South Africa, born in the early 70s. And it was an era of control, really strong governmental structures over everybody. Although the typical perspective is that it was just white over black. This wasn't, we weren't allowed to discuss the politics of the country. We weren't allowed to be in a narrative, and that got reflected in the religious space as well. I was educated in an Anglican environment. My entire schooling was, church 5 or 6 times a week, and a home with parents who were kind, loving, gentle, and not emotional. So there wasn't any language, and really it was only in the middle of the 80s that an author coined the term emotional intelligence. That didn't exist for the first 10 years, and it certainly didn't exist in my parents' vocabulary for most of their life. At a certain point, I kept dipping into the church space and trying is what I would say. I tried, but I was always like, things didn't quite meet me. It didn't make not in an embodied, heartfelt way that I could relate with. And it was really in my very late 20s, that Saturn return period that folk might speak about astrologically. It's 28 to 32 that I discovered the world of energy and the world of healing, and that gave me this felt sense of the spiritual self that I had always felt. I was a pretty gentle kid. I was a pretty connected kid. And then I was in an environment that was bullying and teasing and controlling. And I kind of lost my own self. And then it was in coming back through the doorway of energetics that I reconnected to a much wider, more inclusive spirituality.
I'll tell you, I guess what I want to ask and you're going to obviously get to this, but the set of books, there's a bunch of them that you've written. I want, like, the stories themselves are gorgeous, but you do this thing at the beginning of them where you really get people to kind of just, the children specifically, to slow down, and it's almost kind of a breathing exercise. And I'm curious, Britt's asked kind of about your spiritual journey. When do you really start to feel like you're taking in concepts that are deeply helpful to human development? Like, when do you start to really sense like, whoa, like if we could just get people to slow down and be present, magical things can happen?
Well, I certainly started through the door of my own suffering, right? Like most of us do. It's like my first counseling session that I ever went into was because of a relationship breakup, and as my ex sort of threw her last words at me walking out the door, she says, "You have no idea what love is." And I was like, "You're right. Thank you. That's useful. Let me go and find out." And she really was right. The word love wasn't in the environmental vocabulary that I was raised in at all. Nobody ever said, "I love you." And so it was a confusing thing for me. And I started my inquiry, and that took me to the first sort of personal growth courses, the first counseling spaces. And I think that it took some time for my own drama and the pieces that I was disconnected to settle before I could start to look around really in any way, as my safety returned, as I returned back into connection with myself, as I plugged back into my creativity. And it was like I trained for 4 years with Dr. Barbara Brennan and her School of Energy Healing. And that gave me an environment which was a group environment where I could look around and go, oh, the things I'm experiencing, I'm not alone in experiencing. Look at all these other classmates. Look at all the clients and practice clients that we're helping at that stage, who are all presenting these thematically similar issues in their life. And we're all adults, and we're all trying to resolve our childhood issues. And something in that has a level of craziness in it for me. It's like, wait, what? Like, why do we just not create the issues at the beginning if we can? Or why don't we better do the work of repair and restoring confidence within the 24 hours of the incident that is destructive to it, or kind of corrodes it, so that we don't have to carry things for such a long time in life. I'd certainly carried things for 30 years before I started to go looking at it, and I didn't sit at that stage and say, oh, I'm going to write a collection of conscious bedtime stories. I'm going to make these 20 themes central to them, and I'm going to do it. I'm much more in the moment than strategic like that. I'm not a chess player. I'm a checkers player. And at some stage, I was out journaling, writing poetry like I like to do, and I wrote a poem, and it needed some pictures, and that became the first book that I didn't know was ever going to be a second book. All I knew was that was the spark of inspiration in that moment, and that book was called A Little Light. And I didn't know how to make a book. And I just knew I had a friend who was an illustrator, and she charged £10 an hour, and I earned £10 an hour. It took us forever to make the thing, and we made it up as we went along. And and then I didn't share it with anybody because I was very protective over, and not yet ready for the world to give me any feedback about it. My experience as a kid was that whenever I created something, the world took it, chopped it into pieces, and said, you're not very good at this. And I was like, this is not what this is about. This is my baby. I made it for me, and I kept it for like 4 years before it started to really get shared.
So that was very curious. So what was the impetus that allowed you to kind of open up, and what kind of allowed that opening to be able to share that little baby with the world? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a great question, because you catch a curious moment for me as well. Was that I was up in the Findhorn Foundation visiting in the north of Scotland. That's one of my sanctuary places, spiritual homes, and I wrote another 2 poems that I immediately knew also needed to be books. So it became, all of a sudden, there were 3 of these things, and that gave it a little bit more gravitas, that I could start to talk about it as it was a thing that not just that I had done once, but a thing that I was doing, and was doing again. And yeah, that got me talking about it a little bit more.
So then what was the journey from then to kind of the TED Talk, where now you're not just like giving a poem to a friend, you're now kind of on a world stage and being recorded, kind of telling the story of, go to the kind of the next step of that journey to up to where your TED Talk goes?
I've developed an immense trust in the creative spark, the thing that comes through me and comes out. And I've practiced following that with open curiosity to see where it takes me. And there was a moment where my entire world had changed. My second parent died, and I was sitting around asking the question, what am I going to do? I knew I was moving from South Africa to America. I'm the guy who won the green card in the green card lottery. And so it was a fortuitous opening of an entire world that previously, as a South African, I didn't have access to. And I was like, what am I going to do when I get there? And at that stage, I went to the Frankfurt Book Fair. I looked at the book industry. I did a fantastic strategy process with a chap by the name of Jonathan Fields. And I came up and said, you know what, this healing training that I've been doing in the background and these books that I've been doing as little hobbies somehow seem like they're actually congruent, that they're aligned pieces in my path and in my purpose. And I want to follow that. And at that stage, I knew I was creating conscious bedtime stories as a business that I was going to follow and see where it took me. Many things to learn along the way. I moved to Boulder, Colorado. I did my first farmers markets. I worked out how to print books, how to put, how to mechanize a business in books, and those early moments of meeting people and standing behind a table and saying, here, this is what I'm thinking. This is what arises through me. I want to share it. Tell me what you think. Hopefully these are helpful. Let me know how they're helpful. And the responses were really just overwhelmingly beautiful and absolutely wonderful. And I want to come to the bedtime part of it, because you started at the beginning by we were talking about our different spiritual upbringings. One of the things that was very curious to me was it was sort of like prayers, where you go to bed just before you go to sleep, you say your nighttime prayers, and then you climb to bed and you do that. Now, there was something in that I still liked. I had this profound experience as a kid on the night where I got really scared that in that moment I had gone to prayer by myself, and I just remember like the bedtime and transitions and connection with parents seem to have so much sweetness in it. How does that get lived in a spirituality that is not Christian or not prayer centric, in a home that's perhaps values centric, and that's connection centric? And I was like paying attention to that. And so my TED Talk, which is Why the Last 20 Minutes of the Day Matter, was an exploration of that from the spiritual side. It was an exploration of what happens to our trauma? Where do we put it in our body? And it was like this little light bulb moment to me that says trauma happens when we're awake. Nobody had ever said that to me in all of these years of like study. We'd never stated this thing that was so obvious, that you're awake when it happens. If you're asleep and something traumatic happens, you wake up. But then our body and our brain is making sense of our day. It's integrating our experiences, our painful experiences, and our good experiences, and it's developing behaviors. We develop scripts that guide our behaviors, that say, in order to stay safe, you should or shouldn't do something. And it's just a beautiful mechanism for safety. But if it's developed in an infant mind in the first couple of years of their life, that mechanism may no longer be serving us as we grow into adulthood and we mature. And so again, how can we go all the way back to our kids, and if they had a difficult experience today and we meet with them tonight before they go to sleep, can we be the restorative moment for that difficult experience before the strategy gets developed and all of the behavioral mechanisms get put into place, so that they protecting themselves and feel like they can't face the world just by being who they are.
I think it's brilliant, by the way, because we know now, science tells us that often our REM sleep, our dreams, the things that go on at night that our brain goes through, is a way to reconcile the things that didn't go the way they should have in our real life, right? Like, it's our chance to take these traumas and to process them and to kind of get rid of some of it. And you're right. I don't know where exactly they're stored, but I can tell you they're in there, our trauma. Because all of us have really horrendous things happen to us in the nature of being a human being. Some of it's unavoidable. I always say there's this certain amount of trauma that we're going to incur no matter what. Just the birth of a child is traumatic for the baby and the mother.
Right.
We're going to incur trauma no matter what. And the ability to come at the end of the day, as you're pointing out, with these stories that you do, and to give little kids the chance to take a deep breath, to think about parts of their world that don't exactly go the way they think, and to then be given tools to kind of deal with that, to me is just not only brilliant and practical, but man, so much needed, I think, in a world today that I think maybe for the first time is a space where your books could have deeply succeeded. Because I don't think there's anything like this 50 years ago and 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And I don't know if it would have been successful then. I think now's the moment where people really are welcoming in spirituality completely disentangled from religion.
Right.
So anyway, I just want to say thanks.
And so let me throw in a few of the themes for folks who don't know the collection. And you get the themes through the titles. We'll do story time in a minute together, so stick around for that. This is and there's one of the kids' favorite stories is a book called The Hug Who Got Stuck. It's about a little hug coming out of the hug factory in the center of the heart. There it is. You guys got your copies. And as this hug tries to get out of the hug factory in the center of the heart, it gets caught in the web of sticky thoughts. So this is an age-old head-heart dilemma. It doesn't matter, anything about your ethnicity or your racial belief or anything. This is going to happen to you. You're going to try and keep your heart open, and your head is going to tell you some sticky thoughts. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you don't belong. Those type of things. We've all got to meet those moments and find our way past them. Then I've got here The Boy Who Searched for Silence. And this was written after a 4-day silent meditation. The story just dropped in, wrote itself. I felt like it came right through. The Girl with Waterfall Eyes is one of the more dreamy, meandering stories. And each book's got its little core lesson. This one says, helping children to see beauty in themselves and others. And so Bill, you've been pointing to the architecture of the book. It's like the reading experience that starts with what we call the Snuggle breathing meditation. Then we go into the story, and then at the end of the story, there are there's an activity page. It's a conversation starter. I mean, one thing I hear from parents, your kids jump in the car after school. You say, "How was your day?" and they go, "Fine," and that's the only word they utter. When you tuck them in at night and you read them a story, yabba, 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 chit, chat, chit, chat, chit, 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 this happened, that happened, I don't know about this, da, 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 da. So there's an opening that happens at that time and in that side-by-side connection as you snuggle together that really allows some connection. We want to use the activity pages in the back of the book as just a conversation starter and a bit of direction. That's a little bit like drop in the easiest possible way, a playful skill that we don't even know is being learned, but the language is coming into the space. So then you can say, "Oh, honey, do you have a stuck hug? Or do you remember what happened to the bee who couldn't choose her flower when she didn't make a decision? Can I help you making a decision now? And then the language of the stories comes right into the home and becomes just part of everyday life.
One of my favorites, the dad who didn't know, like us kids have this impression that adults have everything figured out. And I think it only helps a kid to understand that none of us have all the answers. I think and obviously as a grandpa, it also gives me a little chance to poke my son a little bit as I'm reading to my grandkid, that his dad doesn't know everything, So I really enjoy your work.
Yeah. So I had a couple of things that came up for me. I loved a couple of things there. So first of all, I understand what you mean by, maybe like you were born in this Christian context and then it just wasn't resonating with you, but there were certain tools there that were helpful. And how do I plug in a more helpful tool in that space, right? So when you're talking about prayer, I had the same thing happen with my family where I didn't feel like I could pray anymore with my kids. Like that just didn't feel good to me. But then gathering around at dinner time and saying something, like as a family to start, we're going to say something here. Still felt really important, still felt like this is really valuable, something that I should do. And so even just like a couple weeks ago, I just felt like I'd like to do something here. And so I just thought of and so I'm making something up. And so my kids like the movie Lilo and Stitch. And so before dinner, we'll hold hands and we'll say, Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And it's just a little thing, but because there was something valuable in that, in my memories of gathering with my family and saying something and kind of quieting down before we eat a meal, that was really valuable. And I had to find some way to keep that value, but do it in a way that felt authentic to me. And so this book kind of does that same thing, where instead of kind of gathering and maybe saying a prayer wish list, which is how I was raised, that before bed we say sorry for all the terrible things that we did so that God doesn't, whatever. And we make our wish list of all the things that we wish God would do for us. I didn't want to do that. I wasn't interested in that. But you're right. There was something there in that connection, in the dark, in the quiet, where there's a moment there for teaching and for opportunity. And so I get this sense. I have one daughter who I read these books to the most. She's my most emotional daughter. So just really big emotions. She's 6. And I just get the sense that whenever we're together at night, she's borrowing my nervous system a little bit when we snuggle. She's borrowing my body for a little bit. She's borrowing my thoughts a little bit in order to cope with her day. And the breakthrough was that, you start reading these books, and then not always, there'll still be the tantrums and that kind of thing. But once in a while, there'll be this breakthrough where a 6-year-old can verbalize, I have some sticky thoughts. Can we go lay down and get the hug out? She'll say something like that. And we'll go and we'll breathe and we'll talk about all the people who love her and all the people she loves. And we'll kind of do this together, and then she'll go about her day. And yeah, maybe it's one time out of 10, but she's 6. And that's a really big skill for a 6-year-old to learn, right? Because we didn't, you and me and Bill, it doesn't sound like we got these skills till we were in adulthood. So that's been the really beautiful thing for me to watch, is I'm looking at all these places in my life where there was a religious or specifically Christian kind of tool, but then is there a better thing that I can plug in there that's going to be more helpful than maybe the prayer wish list or whatnot? And so that's been the most valuable part for me, was just kind of seeing that language come into the family conversation, and hope that these tools help them and aid them as they get older, so that they don't have to look so hard to find these tools, or maybe suffer, longer than they need to as human beings. So that's just kind of what that brings up in me.
Yeah, I had a profound moment when I was first developing these books and developing the Snuggle breathing meditation. So the 4 breaths of I breathe for me, I breathe for you, I breathe for us, and I breathe for all that surrounds us. And that's the the transition tool that gets us into the world of story. And I had been developing this I was living in a community. There was a 3-year-old in the space who we tried this with, and with certain success and certain resistance. And you will find that your kids at some stage go, I don't want to do the breathing. And it's like, you're like, well, mommy wants to do the breathing. This is good for her. So I'm just going to do it. You don't have to join. And then you just do it out loud right there. They will entrain and attune and most likely come along for the journey, or they'll try and hold their breath for the whole time. It doesn't, you're still doing the modeling of what it is that is possible for them. And fast forward 3 years, I'm going to hang out with this now 6-year-old. I'm actually babysitting. We're under the pillow fort. We're reading Harry Potter, and I'm having a bit of a challenging day emotionally. And this kid reaches in, says, "Are you going to cry again?" I said, "I might cry. I'm feeling a little sad today." And his hand reaches in through the pillow fort, takes my hand and says, "Let's do that thing you do at the start of your stories." And I was like, then I cried, then I cried. I was like, oh my goodness. It's like at the first moment of this way that I'm putting out into the world, suggesting folks try this, and then not really plug back into the loop of that, and having someone use that as a way to hold me. It was like, oh, such comfort in my system.
That literally happened to me yesterday, but not as beautiful. It was me losing my patience with one of my kids. My husband's out of town, and so, I have 4 little kids, and so it's a 2-man job, and so I'm my voice is starting to raise a little bit, and that same 6-year-old who has a lot of emotional intelligence and a lot of emotional awareness, which is why she's just such an emotional little kiddo, is because she's taking all these emotions in. She said, "Hey, Mom, do you want to go outside and take some breaths?" Because sometimes I'll say that, I'm going to go outside and take some breaths. And I'm just modeling that. Like, this is what Mom's doing and why. But I wasn't saying that. And she actually kind of said to me, "Hey, Mom, do you want to go outside and take some breaths?" And it was like, oh, yes, I do. And I went outside and I took some breaths, and she was 6, and she noticed, like, oh, this Mom's at a level where usually she says to me, "I'm going to go take a little walk and take a little mom time out." But I wasn't doing that. I hadn't said that yet. And so she gave me kind of a little prompt there, because she knew that that's something that Mom needs to do. And she seems to come back better when she does that. Right. And so, I love just having that be part of the family conversation. And like Bill was saying, I can't imagine kind of families communicating like that 50 years ago. There just wasn't the language. There just wasn't the science of emotional intelligence. It just wasn't a part of the conversation yet. So let me ask you this question. I did this project as part of my master's program, which was to go through all of the children's books on offer. Specifically in this space, it would have been Christian-ish books, and kind of look at, because what we find is if I were to go down to my public library, let me start here. If I were to go down to my public library, there would be a section for kids that would say religion and spirituality. Yep. And in that section, there would be, Jonah and the Whale kind of books, usually, which is like, Jonah made a mistake and God sent a whale and ate Jonah, right? Like, there's a lot of that going on.
Not a lot of room for error, is there?
I mean, it's pretty nasty, right? And so, like, there's the non-spiritual books, which often have good messages and morals and all that. But in the actual, like, religion and spirituality book section, it tends to be, there'll be a few kind of other religions. Maybe you'll get a few 1 or 2 books from another religion other than Christianity, but there'll be, 15 kind of Jonah and the Whale type books. And as part of this master's program, we went through all the children's books available for mostly Christian households and said, you know what, this is a God, or this is a direction worth pursuing, and maybe we need to leave, this God kind of behind, and this is really scary for children, and this is not good. And so my question is, do you have a goal, or do you have a vision, or even just a hope for conscious stories and tools like conscious stories to be able to be used by teachers in schools and in libraries? And how does this become something where you could go to the library and get a book like this and have it be part of the conversation? Because on offer, generally, it's either No Religion or Jonah and the Whale. And that's generally what most parents in America have on offer. So how do we break through that, or what do you hope out of that?
Well, firstly, there are a lot of communities that are open to using my collection of books and books like it. There's a really strong it's not even a resurgence, it's this new wave around like emotional language, social emotional learning. How do we pass skills on through stories? We've been doing that since time began. And one of the first things I did when I set up my business was travel and exhibit at Montessori conferences. So the Montessori school space has a lot of openness to it. The Waldorf Steiner community has a lot of openness to it, but they also have some artistic guidelines that Steiner recommended that we haven't followed. So they might not fit in the school, but they'll fit in the home. And then I've exhibited at the Association of School Librarians, which was fascinating to see the engagement, which was really maybe at that stage 5% of the librarians in the room really got what it was that we were about and what we were doing. And it is speaking to us being at the front of something. It's a blink of an eye ago that the East and the West were separate worlds, that psychology and mindfulness weren't in the same place at the same time. And this is new. It's new, and it's coming, and it's the stories. 99% of my stories will fit any school environment, and then there's the school environment that has some high level of sensitivity around the word God and how God is spoken about. Will have some pushback. We got a beautiful story called The Laughing Witch, which is such a caring story. She's so connected to the earth. She's so in service to her community. And there's some people who can't see past the word witch.
It'd probably be the same group of people that weren't okay with Harry Potter too, right? There may be some overlap there.
Right. And then we've got a book called The Prayer Who Searched for God, which characterizes a prayer riding on a breath, going out into the world searching for God, and then the discovery being that the God within aspect of self. It's not that only God within, God everywhere, but even to have this much use of saying the word God 3 times in 60 seconds can there's some people who just really aren't willing to include that in the narrative, the education that they have around their kids. And I mean, I've got to respect both sides. It's not my job to say what your family values, your family beliefs should be. I'm not going to narrate that. I'm just going to say, here's what mine have evolved into. And what I see a lot of people's around me in the worlds that I occupy, trying to find a way to narrate some of the human experience. Where do we find silence? Oh, it's a place inside of us. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Now that we know that, we don't have to go out in the world look for it, because we can do the looking for it inside. Or what are we doing when our heart gets closed? We're checking on our thoughts, and we're coming back to our heart. Okay, now let's do that. So
a lot of people, I didn't write you this question in advance, but a lot of people we have on the podcast are fighting a battle on 2 fronts, meaning they're trying to sell spirituality to the atheist secularists, and then they're trying to sell maybe some deconstruction to the religious, right? So you're fighting a war on two fronts because, like you said, the religious may have certain ways that they want to say about God that they want to keep, and so you have to work with that, and that's a battle. And then some on the atheist side, sometimes you throw away spirituality with religion, and then there's a loss there that you have to try to get over. And so there's kind of a battle on both of those sides. So for you and your work, how are you finding, is there kind of one group that is preferring you over the other? Are you seeing religious people who want to do spirituality better finding your books? Is this mostly a secular, maybe people who aren't going to church, who are trying to find moral education and these tools for their children? What would you say is kind of, I don't know, either the battle that you're fighting or the people that are finding you in this space?
Yeah, I watched a bit of this when I first moved to America, just seeing these different dynamics, hearing of schools developing yoga programs that couldn't use certain words because they needed to be entirely non-spiritual, non-religious, just physical body movement.
Yeah, it's in America, we have quite a dichotomy, and there's problems on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely problems on both sides. What was clear for me in those early days is that I have a spiritual heart, and that I was going to stand in that, and I wasn't going to compromise my spiritual heart in order to fit into a non-spiritual, moral-only space, and try and bypass the fact that we're spiritual beings. It's really what I know me to be, and it's what I think we are. But I haven't been too far in the conversation. Nobody's asked this question before, so I like the opportunity to speak to it. I have some concerns about the removing of this sense of spirituality from the human experience. I think it leads to a lot of anguish around purpose and around identity and direction. There are definitely things that I've experienced in my own life that I would say that part of the moments where I struggle the most, like my aloneness is a struggle of mine, my occasional bouts of depression. It's like a lot of these happen when I am what I would call spiritually disconnected. And a lot of them are quickly remedied when I can restore that spiritual connection. Now, that has particular meaning for me, and I've got to, I can sit on the mat, or I can go and retreat, or I can be in community and cohort. The central thing for me in all of the books is the word connection. I speak about it in my TED talk and saying that whenever there's a painful moment, there's what energy does is it separates, and that there is disconnection that happens. And this is like, you can see it if it's as simple as relational. It's like, if I'm having a fight with you, we don't feel close anymore. We feel separate. And if we can get through that argument and make our way to our apologies and our admissions, we will come back into connection, and then we will feel better about ourselves and each other. And I think that this happens internally in like spiritual connection, internal connection to self. And I'm still exploring at what age developmentally this is true for kids. I don't want to say this is, I don't want you putting this onto your 5-year-old. I'm saying this is, in a way, it's an adult thing that as we've developed, we have this witness capacity that comes in that says, I can see myself doing things. So they don't necessarily have that function yet. But developmentally, they will grow into it, and we want to be able to support their kindness to themselves when they get to that.
Yeah, last week, Bill and I and two other commentators, we read through the Brian McLaren's book, Faith After Doubt, and one of his kind of prescriptions for how to make religions better is that this kind of transcendent love and connection that people can talk about in the later stages of spirituality, that has to be embedded at every stage, like music. And so we teach kids the notes of music, and it's very simple. And what they can play on the piano is very simple, but you have to have those tools in order to create your own music when you're 25. And so that love and connection has to be embedded at every level of development so that you can create beautiful music of your own someday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of one of the underpinning structures in most of my stories is have in it what I would call a healing response. So it's a simple arc where we meet the character, we see the world they're in, they get into trouble, and they get stuck, and then there's a moment where the stuckness can turn into freedom again, and they can be themselves, and they can take with them the kind of the harvest of that difficult moment and what they've learned from it. And it's just there's so much comfort in reading the story that Hug who got stuck, when it gets unstuck and it gets free, which all the kids are like, yay, and we read and do story time, and they're cheering, and we recognize the inner experience, because nobody likes having a tantrum. Not even the 5-year-old who's in the middle of it. They don't like being there. It's deeply uncomfortable, and they like the resolution that comes out of that. And if we can hold the resolution closer to the moment of discomfort, then there's a better flow. We can make that transition faster.
I'm going to shift here, unless Bill, you have something. I'm going to shift here to, you had on your website that not only are you doing these books for kids and then, going about and reading them and trying to get them out, but you also do for adults like creative coaching. So helping adults kind of get to that edge. For me, it's I'm not particularly an artist or have a lot of visual creativity, but I get to that place where I'm writing and I'm watching myself write, and it's my conscious self is watching my subconscious kind of write. And so whatever I'm writing, it's almost like a surprise to myself, right? So I get to that, the most creative space for me is when I'm writing, and I can get to this flow state where it's kind of a conversation within myself where I can even be surprised by what I'm writing, or connections that I've made that I wasn't conscious that I was connecting. And so that's kind of the edge of creativity for me. And I really, really enjoy being in that space. Not just for things like depression, because I do get into a flow state, but also just for what comes out of it. I can even be surprised by the wisdom of something that I've written, or I've never heard anyone connect to this idea over here to this idea over here, but it seems like something in my brain did. And wow, that was interesting. So it's a magical place. There's some mystery around it, right? We don't completely understand that place neurologically, but tell us kind of about creative coaching and how you help people find that space.
Well, for context, when I was 30 years old and went into the healing school environment, I didn't have a creative bone in my body. And so it was a major discovery for me to reconnect to this lost aspect of myself, and then have it become such a prolific aspect of my daily life with the writing and the creating of these books. And what I noticed is that I pretty much feel good all the time when I'm doing the creating. If I'm in the writing space and if I'm in the creating space, I feel like I'm aligned with my purpose. I feel like I'm spiritually connected. I feel like I'm just doing me the way that I'm designed to do me. And that you speak about the flow state. It's like, it feels so good. And then I did this quirky little project back in 2010 when the Haiti earthquake had just happened. I was living in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I went out and I sat down on a sidewalk and I put out a sign and I said, donate a poem. And I invited people to write poetry with the word quake in it as an act of service to the people of Haiti. And And all sorts of magical things happened that I couldn't have anticipated. But in the process, I began a process of watching people's response to creating. I've just spent 4 years learning about the energy field, learning about psychology, learning about the expression of essence and how essence gets trapped and doesn't come out into the world, gets withheld. And here I was now literally watching. I've watched 2,500 people write poems spontaneously on the streets, and I've seen all of the language of resistance where people say the same thing. No, I can't. I don't know how. I haven't written a poem in forever. We've seen the group of people who say, yes, here I can write a poem, and then hand it to me and go, but it's rubbish. And they belittle themselves immediately for this brand new, beautiful thing that they've just done. And so along the way, I've begun to track the different expansion and contraction cycles that creative living is, that life is, that I was first introduced to in a healing context, but I've applied more to creativity. And I'm really in service to helping people get past the things that stop them. And we spoke a little bit earlier, but the moment we have an idea that goes, oh my goodness, let's do this thing, our safety mechanism kicks in like a half breath later, and says, oh, not sure. When you did that when you were 4 years old, didn't work out so well for you. Maybe you shouldn't do that. And it slams on the brakes. And then there's this push-pull that's going on between this impulse, which actually has wisdom and wants to go somewhere, and then the belief of the world that you're not going to be loved for doing the thing that is arising as you to do. And I help people with that moment because it's my observation. I mean, I've been in therapy for 20 years, my own therapy, and I still have these little echoes from the past come up. I've looked at them multiple times, and yet every time I think of doing something, they still show up and slow me down and tap the brakes. And so there's something in it to me that says it doesn't matter how much therapy you do. Therapy is important, but useful, but it doesn't matter. It can't get you to where your creative spark is trying to get you. Your self-expression is beautiful, it's wise, it's deserving. We need it in the world so that we create a better world, we create a better environment. And how can I help you get past the things that stop you just coming right through and showing up? I'm passionate about it. I love it. It's great work with a privilege to support people both individually and in groups around it.
I'm curious about my co-host, Bill. When would you say, Bill, that you get your most creative side come out? Is it when you're in, because I've seen you in conversation where you will kind of watch your brain change your mind, which is really cool to watch when you're on a podcast. So is it in conversation, or when does that side come out in you? I'm curious.
I think it's anytime I'm exposed to new ideas, new data. So when I feel the most spiritual, and I define spiritual as being in awe and wonder of the outside world and the inner world, is when I'm listening to someone, reading something, listening to something where someone presents an idea that expands my mind to something it hadn't thought of before. But there are things I go back to too. So I'll give an example: the 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. I don't know what it is about his set of books, but when I read them, I am just deeply touched by the ideas in there, even if I've already read the book 3 or 4 times, But for the most part, it's when new information that, I don't know, I find new ideas that help me to be a better person exciting. Again, when I'm sitting reading this to my grandson, we'll do the breathing thing, and I'll look at him as we're doing the front exercise, Andrew, and you can see his chest get big. And yeah. And he's 3 years old. And And his mom and dad have taught him that when he is emotionally heightened and his world is kind of falling apart in the moment as he starts to have a temper tantrum or something, they've taught him, like, let's take a deep breath. And sometimes, like you said, you can't get him to take all three of them, but he'll take one,
Yes.
And you can sense that he is more grounded afterwards. So watching him learn new things also feels, to watch another human being learn new things is also amazing. But my most creative spaces are when I see a new story or a new idea and I follow it down. It's all its tracks, trying to figure out how I can incorporate it into my world.
And it is creative because I'll watch you on a podcast, get a new idea, and then your brain goes, it'll connect. It'll go ding, 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 ding. And you get really excited and you have to say all the things that just popped up in your brain. But it is very creative. It's like you're weaving, like people who will weave different textures, together, and this is art, and you'll weave in your brain, and I'll watch you do that sometimes.
Yeah. Like Andrew's saying, I've never been in the midst of creating new content for a podcast where I do the research on the history or whatever it is. I'm never experiencing depression in those moments.
Right.
I'm never experiencing sadness or despair. I'm always feeling some degree of exhilaration and contentment when I am in those creative spaces. So I think Andrew, you nailed something there.
Go ahead.
I'm just it's let's broaden what creativity is. So it's not just the painter with a paintbrush or the musician with a guitar. It's like that. This is actually a process of life that is happening all the time. Like from absolute nothingness, something's emerging as an impulse, as an idea, as information, and we're following it all the time. There's small cycles in a day. There's large cycles of our life that we can view this through, and it has it can take us all the way, is my feeling. Whatever, we talk about almost awakened here. It's like, I think it can take us all the way. I think it is the closest we can get to life itself. It's hard to talk about. It's a big thing. What is that? It's kind of that, but it's new. It's emergent. It's vivid. If you come into the mesmerization we spoke of as you watch yourself write. I mean, one of the things I like to invite people to do is to write a 7-minute poem with the word spark in it, and then watch your hand as it manages to do this thing, and like, whose words are these? Where did they come from? It's extraordinary at that level of Zoom.
It is. It's mysterious enough that you do get to these kind of esoteric places where you start saying something like, I'm a little piece of the universe that's expressing and discovering itself, and because where does this come from? And it is almost as if these states or these passions or whatever that idea is that fills me up with exhilaration, which is for me creating spiritual lessons and for teens. Like that's the impossible idea that just lights me up. Did I choose it or did it choose me? It's much more that it chose me. And so that is fundamentally mysterious. But we did have a audience question that I wanted to ask you, which was, I wish there was a better term than spirituality because the word indicates a belief in spirits, aka the supernatural. And for some of us, that's silly, but we recognize our brains have aha modes. So on this podcast, sometimes we talk about how this place that we're talking about of creativity or connection, these are subjective experiences that are profound and meaningful, that we're trying to put words to, and the only available words are have this religious kind of baggage around it sometimes. So do you just kind of, how do you navigate that when you're talking to people? If people call that space God, do you just go there with them and call that God, or do you have reservations about calling that place God? How do you deal with kind of the language around these subjective experiences and then the triggers that come up with people, because inevitably whatever word you choose is going to be insufficient in some way, or it's not going to translate to the other person in the same way. It's just a minefield of language. How do you think about that?
Yeah, if there's ever the opportunity for personal engagement around it, and I don't mean engagement around the subject of the words, I'm just talking about the personal connection, then that's where I'll go to. I'm looking for the common ground. I'm looking for the shared connection. It's like, oh, you fell off your bicycle when you were 4 years old and hurt your knee. I did that too. I kind of feel like I know what that's like. I have at different times had different challenges with different words for myself. So I can understand and relate to what that might feel like. It can feel very difficult when God isn't your word and somebody else is using that word. And it does that thing where we kind of push away because we go into the ideology as opposed to, the moment of two people meeting each other. Now for me, I really don't mind the position that someone else takes. I feel like I'm okay if your language is. I have dear friends who are Seventh-day Adventists, and we go for walks and we pray together, and it's like, and we have completely different worlds, and I don't think that they necessarily understand my world, but I don't need them to. And I for sure don't entirely understand their world, but I see their commitment and I see their faith and I see their spiritual inquiry, and that makes me feel good. It's like if you're in the work of your own inquiry, and this is in the parenting space, we see so often parents who feel that they're not good enough parents, and they're telling us about it whilst being at a parenting conference where they are learning how to be better parents. It's like they're in the game already, taking care of becoming better at the thing that they think that they're not great at. If you're in your inquiry, as opposed to rigidity, and you're exploring things for yourself, I've got all the love in the world.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Bill.
Love it. I mean, again, to the question that the person put in the comments, yes, the world thinks of the word spirituality a certain way, but we in this space recognize that ball, that's been moved. That goalpost or whatever's been moved. Like we recognize that the collective folks on the second half of life have begun to redefine that word in a way that the books that are spiritual today are very different than what would have been a spiritual book 20 years ago. And so I would just suggest people redefine the word. I said earlier that spirituality is when I feel awe and wonder about my outer world or inner world. Folks are free to take a definition sort of like that and start to put that definition out into the world. And as you can already see, that word is changing. It's changing dynamically. If you go online and Google any browser search engine and type in what is spirituality, the answers that come up today are just so much different than what you would have saw, because spirituality was so connected to religion. And in the last, say, decade, maybe decade and a half, you've really sensed the Western world. I think you made a great point, Andrew, that Eastern and Western thought, Eastern world, Western world have been very much distinctly separate, unknowing of each other practically. And now we're in a place where people are doing secular Buddhism all over the place. People are looking at sacred text with new eyes and doing things in a much different manner. And so I just don't think we're limited to what definition was created in 1850. I think we can create a new meaning in words, and I think it happens every day all over the place.
Yeah,
I just hope that it's heard that I'm not. We're in the wrestle of language together. We're all in it. I still want to come down to the heart space, and come to the connective space and say, there's no part of me here trying to assert anything over anybody else. There's no part of me trying to make me right and somebody else wrong. I've lived under that. In apartheid South Africa, it's deeply uncomfortable for me to be that. I may still slip into it from time to time, but then I have the skills to apologize and to say, oh wow, and I'm sorry I did that and I didn't mean to. What was it like for you? And then we can come back again into this place of the heart and just go, the nuance. I would hate for the nuance of the language of one word to be the reason why we miss each other, and the reason why you know what is good in my collection of stories, gets thrown out entirely. You spoke right at the beginning, baby in bathwater, right? How do we choose which is where we want to lead from? And a lot of these dialogues around they can become extremely cognitive and extremely, I don't want the righteousness of it from me. It's like, it's not. It's what I want to hear. What are you struggling with, and how can I help you? And and which story might be in service to that, and where's your creativity stuck in your life, and let's get that moving in your life, because it's like all of these things move all of us forward.
Yeah, it seems like the tool that you're trying to pass along is way higher priority than the belief system it's placed in. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, like, look, I've got people who, the prayer that searched for God, and then the book about the witch, you've placed these tools in various narratives. And you've got people on both sides who maybe get uncomfortable, but that speaks volumes about your ability to not limit yourself in any one sort of religious narrative, dialogue, or to get stuck on words.
I like that. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just wondering if it's story time. It's like
one more thing, and then we'll do story time. But that brought up for me is in this conversation of what words do we use, and what's actually, we have conversations about what's really going on. And what I like about your approach is that by doing the hard approach, like we're just going to go in on the hard approach, it almost like fixes. So when you're talking to the Seventh-day Adventists, there's a lot of religious criticism that you can do in that space. But by doing the hard approach and getting there, it's almost like those critiques then start to take care of themselves from their heart space, essentially. Right. Yeah. They would then start to critique things that limit that heart space that they're experiencing in their spiritual life, or those conversations that they have with you. And so it is an approach that doesn't entirely leave the cognitive problems out. It's an approach that says that'll take care of itself better if we can have this connection human to human, where we're not so picky about what's the actual word for God that we're using in this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so
what are you struggling with? I'm so
yes.
sorry. That sounds hard.
Yes. And so the rule that I use for myself is, if we're talking about a subjective experience, it doesn't matter the language or how that is being, translated from their culture or just their brain to mine. How can I find that ground and meet it so that we can make that connection? And it truly doesn't matter. But then if we're having an objective conversation about subjective experience, well, that's like, I'm on a panel and this is a cognitive game and just something that we want to do. And that's a different game, right? Because that's a conversation about, all right, let's take all this subjective experience and try to make sense of what's actually going on. And that's a cognitive game that I enjoy playing, but not really appropriate when you're trying to connect with people and really get somewhere. I leave that kind of over there, and that's a place that I play over there. But I do like this approach. I've learned that it's just better, even if you have religious criticisms, or maybe critical of, or maybe you don't quite use the same word. If you can get to that heart space connection, that kind of just will make sense by itself, or that'll kind of be fixed by itself. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that over time, but I didn't start there. I usually started with, well, your beliefs are stupid. So it's been a long road for me.
Right.
All right. So do we want to go to story time? I know you wanted to share one of your stories, so Bill will kind of put it up on the screen.
If you can present your screen.
Yeah, we're gonna do the little brain people.
That's great.
And This is a story that is giving children language and tools to help them with yucky brain moments. Again, another like term we can put into the lexicon, and you can say, "Are you having a yucky brain moment?" Like, yes, okay, now good. Let's see if we can help. And I will present the story for those who follow along on the YouTube channel, and then we'll talk it through for those who are listening just to the audio.
I can't wait. I don't have this one, so I can't wait.
Okay, share screen. Right, can you see that there now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. So, welcome to story time. Kick your feet up, grab your kids, children of all ages. This story is dedicated to all who think, and that may just include you. And let's do the snuggle breathing meditation together just to start. So I like to put my hand on my heart. If that feels good, go ahead and do that. And the first breath is for yourself. It's that old oxygen mask adage, put your own oxygen mask on first. And so breathing in, I breathe for me. Nice breath in. Now I contextualize that here you are with me, so I breathe for you. Together we make us, and I breathe for us. And we have the context, so I breathe for all that surrounds us. I mean, I'm having a little stretch here. It already feels good for me.
That felt for me, I mean, that was what, maybe 10 seconds, but yeah. I felt, even just doing that, felt like just really a lot of gratitude that like time is one of the most valuable, I mean, it's the most valuable asset that we have. And Bill, gives me so much of his time as my friend. And then we get to meet you, and I just shot you an email, and you gave your time to come talk to us for an hour. And if you would have asked me, are you grateful for that? I would have said, yeah, I'm grateful for that. But in that moment, I felt very, very grateful. Like, wow, these two people are giving me time. Like, that's so valuable. Anyway,
and you can feel your body ground. You can feel your body recenter and ground in the midst of doing that. It's Eastern ideas around meditation and being present are just, I don't know, it's an amazing tool that most humans don't use.
Yeah. Good. So that's your transition tool. It's you can use it on any story, whether it's mine or somebody else's. You can use it between. I actually start all of my work meetings with this. It's an aid for the little quick touch point. Paired and shared breathing is the fastest way for us to attune and regulate with each other, to check in with ourselves, to see how we're doing, what we're feeling. And you just got this wonderful insight there, Brett, as you went, oh, here's me, and oh, I'm doing this thing. And you just glanced around for a moment, and you saw the two of us right here with you, creating this usness for this podcast of yours that goes out into the world. That is me, you, us, and all that surrounds us happened right there for you in that moment. So wonderful to see that. Let's jump into story time. Once upon a time, on a very ordinary day, deep in the center of a very ordinary heart. Nope. That's funny. I've just read you the opening line of a different story because I'm so natural. So let's do the brain story. Once upon a time, on a very ordinary day, deep in the center of a very ordinary brain, a scary thing happened. Deep in the center of this brain lived the little brain people. Cute little characters, look a little bit like squirrels as we look at the profile of the brain. Dopamine was very good at solving puzzling problems and making challenging choices. His twin sister, serotonin, was best at growing feelings of love, joy, and happiness. On most days, you could see the twins happily relaxing in the front of the brain, but not on this day. On this day, there was a problem. Uh-oh. A loud clattering bang gave serotonin and dopamine a fright. A very big fright. Ah! Yelled serotonin, curling up in a ball, whimpering. The world is falling on our heads, shouted dopamine, running to hit the panic button. Everything's turning red. Cousin Adrenaline jumped into action, bursting from his security watchtower, barking instructions. Danger, danger, danger. It's not safe, it's not safe, it's not safe. The echoing screams of frightened little brain people filled all the pathways with worry and fear as everyone braced for lockdown. In the cloud of chaos, serotonin and dopamine collided and started fighting for no good reason. Totally overwhelmed, the whole brain just froze. Uh-oh. Luckily, Auntie Oxytocin had missed all the drama. She'd been sitting on the potty. Whoa, what happened here? She said, her teeth chattering. She paused, breathing calmly, wondering how to help her panicked, frozen friends. They must be having a yucky brain moment, said Oxytocin. I know what to do. She walked to the front of the brain and gently touched the all-clear reset button. Beautiful music played as Oxytocin's calming voice flowed through all the frozen pathways. You are safe. You are safe. You are safe. Ah, sighed serotonin and dopamine, taking deep breaths while wiggling their fingers and toes. Oh well, huffed Adrenaline as he sulked back to the watchtower, knowing that his job was done. The twins chatted happily as they returned to the front of the brain. That was scary, said serotonin. I'm sorry I got mad at you. I feel happy again. I'm sorry too, replied dopamine. That was confusing for me. I'm glad I can think clearly now. That night, the twins snuggled together with their family of little brain people, grateful to be feeling safe and loved once again. They all got the best night's sleep ever. The end.
I love it. I think I never read that. I don't have this one with my kids, although I will be rectifying that soon. My favorite part of that story is that dopamine, like, it wasn't the bad guy. It wasn't like a bad guy came in and is causing all these problems and it's the bad part of the brain. It's dopamine did its job, right? Yeah. He went back to that part of the brain and he did his job because that's what they're there to do. And so there was nothing in there that was like bad. This is bad. Your brain shouldn't do this. You shouldn't feel that way, right? Which is what we get from a lot of like, I see people tell kids, you just need to be happy right now. It's like, well, there's obviously something more going on there. But I love that it just kind of lowers the temperature of adrenaline's doing its job. It's not bad. And then he'll go back and then we can kind of settle here.
That's right. Absolutely. It's a dynamic place. And we have here the brain balance barometer as the activity page at the end of the book. And we have this little barometer that lets you see whether you're feeling calm, focused, happy, frightened, fighting, or frozen. And then if you're in restoring calm, then you'd be sighing, breathing, and relaxing. These are the actions. And it allows us to practice those things during story time when we're not activated, so that when we are activated, we can go, hey, let's press the all clear reset button, sigh loudly, breathe into your belly, stretch, relax, play some music. Yawning is such a great way to down-regulate a tight nervous system, and snuggling as we do in story time. So
loved it.
Yeah. I love that you're using real words. So you're educating kids so that if they were to know this story well, then as time goes on, as they encounter these words in the real world, they get to apply the similar meaning that you've given to them. You're helping the children to understand that each of these play an important role. And I think you're, in this subtle way, really teaching them the secret to getting out of one spot in your head that is panicking and frantic when it doesn't need to be, and to learn to calm down and to kind of regulate and get back to feeling safe and calm. Because again, as you're well aware, and these books point to, all we've got is these present moments, and let's make the most of them. Let's all feel safe as much as possible. There are moments in our life that call for emergency and adrenaline, but they're a lot less than what we think they are.
And the brain is we're coming back to tying this into that creative spark that I mentioned. The spark comes up, and the first thing is, like, all the little brain people check out the safety of the world. And it's right to do that. It's right to just do a quick look around and go, is there a saber-toothed tiger about to eat me? It's not right to then stop because a saber-toothed tiger once showed up a million years ago.
Right.
We sometimes that little thing becomes an impasse for folk that keeps them from really daring and risking to go out into the world, which is it's I don't want to be controversial in saying that the world is a loving and safe place, but I do feel like at its heart, for many of us, that it's in service to us having a loving and safe experience, and that that's not ignoring the fact that many people need to overcome great difficulties to get to that experience.
Right, totally.
All right, I have one last question for you, and then we've taken enough of your time today, and we'll let you go. Do you have anything, projects in the pipeline? What's still sparking your creativity? Are you do you have more books coming? Do you just want to get the books, into more places? What's exciting you for your future?
Yeah, so we definitely want to get the books into more places. That's always part of the both the business need and the service need together. We want to be having this conversation more widely. We have coming up for the first time, we've been shipping to Australia and Canada, but we're actually going to have businesses on the ground in Australia and Canada, which is they're super fans, and this is wonderful. I am writing at the moment my first adult book, which is about creativity. It's about the creative spark and the cycles of creativity, and I teach around that already in workshops. But what's also new, just is the first cohort of people coming through a year-long program together that we call the Creative Huddle. And the Creative Huddle is a place where spiritually minded, creative, entrepreneurial folk can come in, be together, and have like a consistent sense of welcome and kindness to their self-expression. That's also integrated with some just community accountability that keeps things moving forward, so that we don't drop the ball on our own ideas. And I'm very excited to see what the members of the group actually create in their lives over the course of this year together. And that's out now, and we're come and chat to me about it. It's a very low-key launch, so I'm delighted to be able to talk about it, and would love to have folks come and meet with me, and I'll take them through what we're going to do.
I just want to throw a comment up real quick, Britt. Controversially, in my upbringing, the word meditation was thought as a negative word. I love how you're educating children to know it's a healthy thing. So there's another thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, and when that gets published, man, we'll definitely we'd love to have you back on the podcast to talk about it. That's so exciting. I've known people who have done cohorts for different things, and I've seen really, really big projects come out of cohorts where you're holding space for trying something and getting used to putting your ideas out in the world and getting a little bit more confident. And then, one of our friends, John Ogden, who has a program called Uplift Kids, which is a spiritual curriculum for kids, it came out of one of those cohorts. And so that's really exciting. And we'll definitely have you back on when you're ready to promote that. And good luck to you. And just thank you for all that you do. And we've been using your stuff we didn't even talk to each other, and we had found your work. So we just so appreciate that you put your little poem out into the world, and because we definitely benefit from it. So thank you so much, Andrew Newman.
Britt, thank you. Bill, thank you. So just for being ambassadors for conversation and dialogue, and with an openness that's it's a gift to the world. And I'm delighted to have been able to come and join you and meet you both in this way.
Perfect.
Really look forward to hearing from your community and seeing what this sparks in them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend.
All
All right. Britt, do you want me to let him go and talk a little bit after? Or do you want us just
let's
close
chat
up?
for a second.
All right. I'm gonna let you go, Andrew. Have a great day, and can't wait to see what you come up with over the coming years.
Wonderful. All the best.
Take it easy. All right. Give me a second to make that look a little nicer.
Yeah. What did you think?
So I'll tell you, having used these books several times, I've probably read these stories to my grandson maybe 6, 7, 8 times. We haven't had the books that long. I think this is the kind of stuff that changes the world. I mean, imagine an extra 1,000 kids, and that's not much. Imagine an extra 1,000 kids who are influenced by these reading materials.
Yeah.
Imagine parents reading these stories who are influenced by these reading materials.
I do think that the next generation has a lot of challenges. Like our Paleolithic brains, it's very clear that like the level of communication that we have, like we're still kind of grappling with it. The next generation's going to have its own problems and challenges, and certainly, social media and other things are challenging, but they also have so many tools. Like the fact that my 6-year-old, there's 2 things that my 6-year-old did that I never could have done until I was an adult. And one was when a doctor said, "Can I lift up your dress to look at your tummy?" She was just wearing a dress and she said, "No, thank you." So the doctor got a sheet and put it over her underwear so that he could look at her belly. And I was like, it took me until I was an adult to be able to say to an adult man, "No, I'm not comfortable with that."
Yeah, right.
But we had talked about consent, and it's just part of our family conversation that it's your body and you get to choose. And then this thing where like she knows, she'll say sometimes that she has sticky thoughts and will do this, or she'll tell me to go take my breaths when I'm losing my patience. And like I didn't have like at 6, like that's something. Now does that mean that like I'm a great parent and she's not gonna have any problems? Like no, like there's gonna be a lot of problems that I don't know that I'm creating, problems that I know that are there. There's problems, but there are some tools coming out that we just have never had a generation of kids be able to have before, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And there are so many of these kind of high-end conversations that are happening. And I'm, as you were talking about your kid, I'm thinking about my grandchildren. I'm thinking about my kids. My kids are parenting in exceptional ways that as you said earlier, I couldn't even fathomed parenting the way they are. There's something magical happening. Again, I get it. There's another side of things where people are feeling privileged. People are feeling their privilege being diminished and they're showing up unhealthy. But there is a lot of human beings right now who are really determined to get better and to be healthy and to show up in ways that honors the humanity of everyone around them, and to develop the tools that they become better people themselves. And I'm really enjoying it. I see it all around me.
Yeah, and I'm curious more about, not more, but also about his work with kind of this creative spark thing and getting adults to be able to find that. And the thing that came up for me was, I work with a lot of especially Mormon or post-Mormon women where they'll legit say to me like, okay, my kids are in school now or they're gone. I have no idea who I am, what I want to do, what I like, what lights me up. I don't know what my passions are. And I feel like he has some tools that I don't have that I could learn from, to be able to kind of find that space where something comes through you that's really exciting, right?
Yeah.
And it is a little bit still mysterious. Sometimes we have spiritual language around that because we don't fully understand what's happening, and more goes on in our subconscious than we can even know about. But I'm cute. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have him on when he publishes that book to talk about the adult side of things, which is how do you engage with your life in a way, or find a way to where you wake up and you're excited about the projects of the day, even though life may be ultimately meaningless, right? That's a big adult project.
Yeah. And, the book that I was thinking of earlier that we couldn't come up with was The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller.
Yes.
Is that the one did you say that one?
Yes, I did say that one. It is a great one. I have so many books that I recommend to people, and sometimes I it just depends on my mood for the day. But for you, I was thinking of definitely that would be one that you would like, because I know you. We've spent time together. So I think we should do that one on the podcast. That one's pretty meaty.
It is, but it goes right along with what he's saying. He's pointing out when he feels creative, he feels happy. Creativity, which really is this idea of being curious about something and then going inside and coming up with something new. And whether it's The Awakened Brain, where Lisa is pointing out that spirituality is the thing that solves the depression crisis or the emotional struggle that most humans are having. And then he talks about being creative solves it. These are all the same tool being talked about in different ways. And I just hope over the next few decades, I hope that we humans really start to lean into what tools work and what tools don't. Because I think we're right there on the precipice where we're about ready as a collective humanity for the majority of us to go like, I know this is what's been fed to us, but those tools don't work. Those ones do, and these ones are going to get a light shined on them for a while to see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to make this essentially, like, when you get to that point where, I could do anything I want with my life. What do I really want to do? And I still want to do this. Like in 30 years, like I hope that you and I can still talk about this, because he said it before. We're right on the cusp of something. We're not there, but something is happening. And you get this sense too of like, religion is just not, it has so many great tools. It's not resonating with the kids. Then we give them cell phones. There's this crisis of depression and anxiety and disconnection. And then spirituality is not just, religious woo, but like real spirituality seems to be the antidote to all this, except the religions are no longer able to give that tools to the kids. So now the adults have to work through all of their triggers to be able to try to understand this, to be able to have this be, tools to give to the children. But there's no church that you can walk into where like the primary is reading these stories to your kids. And so we're all trying to figure it out. And so it's messy, but it's exciting. It's an exciting project to keep talking about. And I think you and I will be able to talk about it until the day we die, because we're not there, but something's happening. Something's happening.
Yeah. And it's fun to be in a place where a few people tune in and we get to share things we're learning, or to present people who are doing this foundational work, as Andrew is. And it's really exciting to be in a space where we get to be the tool that is delivering kind of the curiosity of the world to another set of people, and things get perpetuated and ideas get discussed. I couldn't imagine a funner space to be in.
Yeah. This is the best game in town. This is the best game in town. Even if we never get to any answers about anything, this is still the best game to play. So
love it. And I just want to say, by the way, just as we're kind of wrapping up, last year, the Almost Awakened podcast brought in, I think $300. And then Britt Hartley joins up. And last year, we're now into 2023. Last year, I think we raised about $6,000, maybe $7,000. And I just want to say thank you to you. You brought that to this podcast, whatever that is. It's the magic sauce that folks are contributing to help keep this kind of program going. And I just want to say to folks, by the way, Britt is doing 85% of the work here. She is the one who's getting these incredible guests on the show way more prevalently than I am. She just has made such an effort to reach out to the kind of the wise folks around us and to put those voices on the podcast. I thought the Faith After Doubt conversations that we've had have been marvelous. We've just had several guests on that have been exceptional. Folks, if you want to see that continue, please. I don't take any of the funds from Almost Awakened. Britt gets the full amount that a podcast host in this umbrella gets. And because she's doing most of the work, if you like what's happening here, folks, go to almostawakened.org. Become a supporter of the program. Donate $5 a month or $10 a month. And let's take 6,000 this year and turn it into 12,000 for 2023. And let's see if we can't grow this thing to a point where Britt can really focus a lot of her time and energy here, because we're already seeing what she's doing with a limited amount. And just to really appreciate what you do.
I put, I have a limited amount of mom time. And so I do put it into this podcast. So those who, appreciate that and are able to support the podcast, enable me to do what I do. Because as much as I love these conversations, I do have limited mom time that I have to be aware of, and a family and needs and all those things. So this has just been, I have like a word every year. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Bill, but my word last year, I kind of have like a intention word every January just to, I feel myself going in this direction. And my word last year was voice. And it was this idea of like, I don't entirely have the answers to anything, but I really just want to find my voice. And so I reached out to you and we started to have these conversations. And the first couple ones were a little bit awkward. I was still trying to find my voice, but I do feel like that project or that intention was a success in that we were able to get really prominent people in this space, right? Yeah. People like Andrew Newman who are doing really big things to come and talk to us about spirituality. And so I'm really proud of what we've done this year. And I hope that the support continues, which I'm so grateful for, so that we can start getting, even bigger names, right? And so we talked about the awakened brain. Like, I hope we can get Lisa Miller. I hope we can get Sam Harris. Like, I'm going to shoot for the moon here. I'm going to take this as big and as helpful and as meaningful as I possibly can for as long as there's someone listening. So if this has been helpful for you, please, join me in that project by being able to support us. And we had a couple comments. I read through the comments that you sent me from our kind of YouTube channel, and someone had donated because they said this has been therapy for me this year, right? This has been something like therapy for me for the year. And so they felt like they owed something because it had been therapy for them. And I just really appreciated that someone said, you know what, this has been helpful for me. And so I want to support it. And that is really meaningful to me. And I hope we can keep having these conversations for people. So, and for us.
Yeah. I'm just looking, Nick Jankel, Thomas J. Ord, Bart Campolo earlier in the year. I'm really excited to see what we come up with this year. And by we, I mean you, and to a large extent.
As long as you do the tech, oh my God.
Yeah.
You guys don't even know, like, this podcast just looks really smooth and there's boxes moving places and we're reading books on it. The amount of tech that Bill is doing in the background that I am totally helpless with is unbelievable. So don't sell yourself short, friend. Okay. I would not be able to do any of this without that too. And your contributions. So folks, hopefully this is all helping you to be a little bit more almost awakened week after week. And we're really happy to be bringing this to you. You can support the podcast at almostawakened.org. At the top header, just click the donate button. Send us a few bucks every month. We'd love to grow the podcast this year significantly, and we'll see what that means as we go along. But appreciate each of you. And those of you who do donate, thank you so much. It is amazing to watch this podcast grown over the last 12 months and to really see it begin to take some footing. And so we're proud of each of you for supporting us and of the work that we're putting out. We hope that you're proud. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks, Bill.
Take it easy, Britt.
All right. Bye.
This has been another Almost Awakened episode. Check us out at almostawakened.org, where you can check out past episodes, make a donation to keep this podcast running, email us a question or comment, or find out more about the resources shared in today's episode. For coaching opportunities or extra support, visit NoNonsenseSpirituality.com to meet with Certified Spiritual Director Brittany Hartley.